Sup, WordPress nerds. In today's video, we're going to be going over some Q&A. A couple weeks ago, I sent out a post asking for your questions and you guys responded. So I'm going to just go line by line here and we're going to walk through them together. A lot of good questions, so stick around. The first question comes from Mohammed Hashim, who says, who asks, learning React with WordPress theme development, is that a good choice? And I would say absolutely yes. I think that's a great pairing to kind of learn, because not only is React good on its own, but so is WordPress. WordPress has definitely got a space on the internet, obviously, and then so does React. And so being able to learn those individually is awesome. And then not to mention when you start pairing them together. Now you can pair them together with using React inside of WordPress and developing Gutenberg blocks and the interface around that. But also kind of separately yet connected through like a headless WordPress setup where React is on the front end and WordPress is kind of the database and the interface for entering content, using it as the CMS. So very good pairing there. I think it'll cover a lot of bases and definitely help you in freelancing and looking for jobs, things like that. So highly recommend learning both if you can. Johnny asks, any tips for preventing issues when updating clients' WordPress version? And that's a really great question, because this is something that it's a really easy trap to fall into, because you would think that just, updating WordPress is always going to be a good thing and there's not going to be any consequences. But WordPress is fallible, and so are the plugins that you're running, and so is the code that you write on your WordPress site. And so sometimes those can conflict when you're updating WordPress. And so what I would suggest is creating some sort of staging or local environment where you do all of that work locally first. And then if everything looks good, then you can push it up to the live environment. So using something like, MAMP or local or DevKinsta, or, having a staging site just out there in the wild would be awesome for this kind of stuff. This goes the same for plugins, just making sure that before you start, updating plugins all willy-nilly, then I would make sure that they all work locally first. And a good way to kind of go about and making sure that you're checking all the right things is using, a testing library or something like that, like PHP Unit, which I'll go over, and I'll go over in a future video, and then also something like Cypress, which I'm doing currently right now for a Patreon video. So you guys can keep an eye out for that shortly, but it'll go in check all your stuff and whatever you say to go check, and it'll go check it for you. And you can say, oh, looks like we've got an error here. When I updated WordPress, the logo disappeared or something like that, or the menu stopped working. I don't know. There could be a lot of things that it could have been, but it will help make sure that everything is good before you push it back up. Next question is from Ahmed Meshkin, and he is asking, is it crucial for WP development to learn the REST API and Ajax? And the REST API and Ajax, kind of two separate things here. So let's talk about the REST API first. REST API, 100%. You should absolutely learn it if you are going to be interested in WordPress development. It is such a core part of WordPress, and being able to send and receive data via the REST API is huge. And I'd highly recommend it, because then you can also learn more about, making your site headless, which I'm a strong proponent of. And then Ajax is just a general kind of like web development thing, although like WordPress does have a couple pieces of specific wrapping functionality around Ajax that is also useful to learn. You don't have to use it, but it definitely does help if you do like the WP_Ajax_ the action name and all that. I do have a video on that, which I'll link right above right now. But yeah, I would highly recommend that, because they are very useful when learning WordPress. And then Game Dude asks, where do you get your freelance and remote advanced WP projects from, sites, etc.? Most, like 99.9% of my client work that I've done has been word of mouth. The one that I'm down to like one client now, because like doing YouTube stuff and freelance projects and 9-to-5 work and family and making sure that I get in some gaming time. I've had to kind of pare it down and say no to a lot of stuff. But the stuff that I do get is usually from people that I know. Like I've worked at agencies. I have a 9-to-5 job now. And anytime that there's a developer, there's usually a designer of some sort. And designers have connections and freelance projects that they do. And usually I work really well with designers. We kind of become friends, and they reach out to me and say like, hey, I've got this project that I need to work on, and I needed somebody to develop it, and I'll just say yes. And so I've kind of, gone through clients throughout the years, but, usually they come from kind of like a friend of a friend or something like that. Another one though, and I've talked about this in a video a long time ago, is charity work. Charity websites are usually pretty junky, and they need some, love. And if you're there to kind of offer up some either cheap or free work for them, that usually can kind of get the word of mouth out there and kind of build your portfolio and things like that. A lot of times, even charities will be able to pay you because they have a budget for that and all that kind of stuff. And so if you're kind of looking to get in the door into the market, then I would check out, charity websites and things like that and just offer up your services. Tom Benjamin says, I miss your in-depth WordPress videos. A lot of them are so general lately. I'm so sorry about that. I did a video last week on custom Elementor controls, so hopefully that's kind of resets the pace back to something a little bit more in-depth. Holiday seasons are pretty exciting around here, so didn't have a whole lot of time to kind of go through the whole motions of making something a little bit more depth. So I apologize about that. We're back to the new year, and so we're going to get on that again. Ivan Barta asks, what are the alternatives to WordPress and Gatsby, maybe even without WordPress? For example, Strappy and Gatsby. Is React overkill for small and medium-sized projects, or to be enough to use only vanilla JS or Svelte? So a lot of questions in here. Let's talk about what are the alternatives for WordPress and Gatsby. There's Frontity in WordPress, and then there's also like Next.js in WordPress, and you can just straight up use, vanilla JavaScript in WordPress if you want to kind of create your own thing there. But there's a lot of different like kind of headless setups that you can do. I really like the kind of Gatsby, Frontity, and Next kind of trinity there. And I'm going to be doing videos about all of those in the next couple months, so keep an eye out for those. But I've kind of defaulted to Gatsby because it has a lot of WordPress support out of the box. Jason Ball and Tyler Barnes, who work at Gatsby, have been working on a new source plugin for WordPress, and man, they are doing an awesome job. There's a lot of really exciting features in that. So look out for the version 4 of the Gatsby WordPress plugin. Right now it's Gatsby Source WordPress Experimental or something like that, so you can download it right now and start playing with it. But even like without WordPress, doing something at work, we have another team that's using Gatsby and Contentful, which I hear is really good, and they're really liking Contentful. So maybe if you're looking to replace WordPress with something else, try out Contentful for that headless Gatsby setup. And then, is React overkill for small and medium-sized projects? No. React can do any size project. It scales really well, and everything kind of just depends on kind of how well you code it, depends on how well it can scale. So Gatsby for like a hello world or a to-do list kind of mini app or something that, is just for your own productivity. Absolutely. And then would it be enough to only use JS or Svelte? And also, yes, like it's hard to say like for this project's absolutely not or anything like that, because I think that these languages are very robust and you can do quite a lot with them, and they're popular for a reason, is that they kind of check a lot of boxes for a lot of people, and they can be used on a lot of different projects. So hopefully that answers your question. Carlton Gordon asks, will you be doing more WP custom blocks content? I wasn't planning on it, but if that's something that you guys like, reply to this video with something that you'd like me to go over other than just like how to make a basic one. If you need something a little bit more detailed, hit me up. Terrence LP asks, are page builders evil? We all know Elementor is dope, but are they? page builders are good if you use them right. I live in America, and we like our guns here, and guns can be useful if you use them in the right way, but they can also be very dangerous if you use them in the wrong way. I like Elementor. It has its issues. And the reason why I use Elementor the way that I do is we ended up creating a project at work where we needed to get essentially a unified page building system onto 20 plus sites. And so I really like the way that Elementor handles like its logic and the way that it stores its data and how easy it is for the content team to go in there and make updates. And we were able to extend it in a lot of ways to kind of fit what we needed it to do. Some of the evils, though, is that there are simply roadblocks inside of page builders. Like, for example, in Elementor, I can't unenqueue certain parts of Elementor, and that slows down certain parts of the admin section. And there are certain buttons in the WYSIWYG that I just can't remove because they've hard-coded it in the plugin. And also that there's wrapping divs around things that don't necessarily need to be wrapped around. So you end up with a larger DOM size, which you can get penalized for in PageSpeed Insights and Lighthouse and all that kind of stuff. So there are definitely drawbacks. And so unless you're willing to kind of fork the open source version and kind of make those changes on your own, you're kind of stuck with some of those downsides. And if you don't, kind of train the content team on making, really slim and fast pages, it can kind of get bogged down really quick. And so we've had to take extra care to make do with that kind of stuff. Now, if you're just trying to get something up and and you need something quick and easy, and you need them to be able to just kind of install all the plugins that they want, and you just it's kind of a set it and forget it thing. Yeah, sure, go for it. And you don't need to worry about it too much. Install a couple caching plugins and you're fine. Then Sparky1492 asks, best preferred way to remove bloat from page builders plugins once the site is set up and running. And how can you, if possible, debloat, refactor a WordPress site that uses plugins? Goal would be to have the speed of a static page site. Awesome question. I really like these kind of questions. So the way that I ended up doing it with Elementor, at least, is we had to actually fork it. There was certain things that it was just, it wouldn't let us remove. And now later versions, possibly this is different, but we had to fork it and just remove a bunch of stuff. But we had complete control over that. We could make that decision. Now, if you're just in a freelance sense, you're going to have to do your best to use what's in their kind of current ecosystem of the plugin. So Elementor lets you dequeue a lot of its JavaScript and stuff and a lot of its default stylings and lets you take that over completely, which you can obviously slim down to what you need it to. So I would start right there, is making sure that you're dequeuing everything that you possibly can out of the plugin, like emoji support and all this extra styling and front-end JavaScript that it doesn't need. Anything like that, dequeuing components dequeuing widgets inside of the page builder that are overly bloated or have too many options, and remake it using your own code as a much more slim, streamlined version of it. And how can you bloat/refactor WordPress site that uses plugins? I would say, first of all, audit all the plugins that are there. Make sure anything that doesn't need to be there is not there. And also minify everything that you can from your point and move everything to the footer that you can. So there's plugins out there that'll just loop through everything that's been enqueued, minify it, concatenate it, and put it at the bottom. There's also things like WP Rocket, which is great because it does that, and it also makes it so you can cache your pages statically. So if you're looking to get the speed of a static page, every time a page is loaded, it saves an HTML version of that, saves it in the uploads directory, and then reserves that HTML file anytime that page is revisited. So you'll get that same static page site speed as long as your file system can keep up with it. So I think that would kind of get you the right way. And then again, just making sure that you are using the bare minimum possible. Any kind of extra bloat that you add on top of there, anything that you can just like rebuild yourself, like do not use a slider plugin. You know how to build a slider and you can make it work with whatever you've got going on in your WordPress site. So if you come across a site that's using a slider plugin, make your own, delete that one, because all that does is enqueues like 1,000 lines of JavaScript that don't need to be there and loads all these extra libraries that are just useless. So there's things that you should just like straight up rebuild. Confused Charlie asks, what do you use to link your GitHub changes to a live site, FTP/pipelines, etc.? Yeah, so I have all of my code on GitHub, and then at work, we use Circle CI to, reads a YAML file and then runs a bunch of tasks based off of that YAML file. Me in my personal projects, I use buddy.works. It's super easy. It's kind of like a drag and drop thing where you can kind of create these pipelines just by, dragging something in and selecting a few options. And so what I do is that when I push it up to the master branch, Buddy sees that, it clones in the repository, it runs composer and npm install, and kind of builds up this package, and then it moves the entire kind of contents over to a DigitalOcean droplet. And I actually have a video on how to do that on my Patreon. So if you're interested in that, check out the link below for that. So really, really nice, because I hated having just to open up Transmit and just like sync folders or whatever. And if it's a lot of content, sometimes it times out, or if certain files are getting uploaded before other ones, then it just breaks. So it's not a good time. Bit of a personal question, but is there any reason you don't do freelance full-time and work as part of an agency? So I worked in agencies for like, let's see, about 6-7 years when I first started out. And that was great. It was kind of like drinking from a fire hose. You ended up learning a lot in a short period of time. Also super stressful, because, dealing with clients and all that kind of stuff can be stressful. And then I don't do freelance. I kind of talked about this actually a little bit ago here in this video, but freelance full-time is just not my thing. I like doing freelance on occasion because I get to like experiment with stuff. Like at work, I can't use Gatsby and WordPress together because we're just not in our timeline of things. But when a client comes to me that I've been working with, and I'm like, they're like, hey, I want to redo my site. I can be like, oh, great, we're going to use Gatsby and WordPress, and here's all the kind of cool things that we're going to get out of it, and sell them on it. And now I get to do a whole project by myself with Gatsby and WordPress. But I just I really like kind of the security of a 9-to-5. I've got 2 kids, I've got a wife, a couple dogs. Like I've got a family that and I need to kind of look out long term for, and kind of the security of the 9-to-5 job. I really enjoy, and the company that I work for is amazing. So like I do not see myself kind of moving to an agency or doing freelance full time anytime soon. But I do cherish the time that I did have doing that, because there were times in my life where I was doing freelance full time, and there was a part of my life where I was working at an agency full time as well. And so both of them are awesome, and I highly recommend, whatever ends up working out for you. But just for me, it's kind of going corporate has been my been the thing that brings me the most joy right now. Hannah D asks, what do you think about Gutenberg? Is it necessary for theme development? Yes, I like Gutenberg a little bit. No, I don't. I don't like Gutenberg all that much right now. And this could be because when I first got into it, I saw a lot of things that I didn't like. Maybe that's changed with, some of these recent updates. But I was looking at this pre-release of 5.0, and just the way that it saves its data, the way that things were documented, there was a lot of things that kind of just left a bad taste in my mouth when it came to Gutenberg. I'm going to relearn it. I'm going to make the effort to go back in and see if any of this stuff has changed, see if the APIs have been updated, see if the way that they've changed their data structure has been updated. I don't have high hopes, but I'm going to give it another shot. Is it necessary for theme development? And for a lot of people, yeah, it's going to be necessary. I mean, Elementor and Beaver Builder and Oxygen and all these other like page builders are really exciting, and they're very good at what they do. But being able to know about Gutenberg itself and core WordPress development is going to be huge, because you're going to run into a site that uses Gutenberg if you're freelancing, and you're going to need to know how to edit it. And I would recommend knowing how to create blocks from scratch and kind of creating your own. And then also knowing how to work with it with ACF. ACF, I think in 5.8 came out with the ability to make your own blocks with ACF. So those are probably the two types of Gutenberg blocks that you're going to run into. So being able to at least have like a base understanding of how those work is going to be good. Now, I'm not going to fault you for not wanting to build everything out in Gutenberg because it is core WordPress. I don't think that you should be tied to that decision or tied to it because WordPress is pushing it forward. But it is going to be helpful to understand. And therefore, I think, yeah, it's probably necessary to learn it a little bit. Ameka Oka. Oh, I'm going to butcher your last name. I am so sorry. Do you build mobile applications, perhaps with hybrid platforms like Ionic Framework or React Native? Yeah, I've kind of dabbled with it. When I was working at an agency, we did end up having to do a couple of things with Ionic. We were doing stuff with Angular and Laravel. And yeah, I touched Ionic with that quite a bit, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I haven't had to do much since. We are going to probably do a little bit more of app development here in the future, but it's mostly been on kind of like a theoretical, high level kind of mess around with those kind of platforms thing. Like I've done a little bit of React Native here and there too, and I mean that's why I really like kind of the headless WordPress setup, is because you can feed your data into a React Native app just as well as another a headless WordPress site like that's built on Gatsby or Next or whatever. And I really like that. And another question here from Marjan Raisovic. What is the quick and dirty way to use headless WordPress? Transfer existing WordPress site to a Gatsby for someone who doesn't know React.js. Will this improve page speed? My client needs to be the most concerned with page speed and losing functionalities if switched to Gatsby. Yeah. There's not really like a quick and dirty way of doing it. Like usually you have to kind of essentially pretend that you're building everything from scratch when you're moving from, you know, a vanilla WordPress site to a Gatsby site. Like there's no like migration path that's going to be super easy. Not without getting extremely complicated and running like major scripts, but I don't think that this is something that this person is asking. What I would suggest if you're really just looking for page load speed is kind of just making the optimizations that you would normally make to make your WordPress site faster, and then using tools on the server or, you know, with plugins to kind of optimize it even further. So let me explain. WordPress itself can be very fast. There is some overhead with just using WordPress, but that isn't as big as it used to be, and it doesn't deserve the ridicule that it gets. But you can make an extremely fast WordPress site, and so by keeping your plugins thin and slim and being able to make sure that you're only loading resources when you need them, and then caching the hell out of it, is going to make it so it's essentially comparable to Gatsby sites. Like you can install a couple plugins that make it so it preloads content, optimizes images, things like that. And, you know, if you have Redis or Memcache on your site, and then having maybe something like WP Rocket, a CDN, and poof, you can do a lot of things to make that site extremely fast and serve millions and millions of users. So, no, there's probably not a good way to migrate your WordPress content to Gatsby and just kind of like a button click kind of thing, which is what I think you're kind of asking. And yeah, you can do a lot of things to improve your page speed on WordPress without switching to Gatsby, but still get Gatsby-like results. So last question here actually came from Twitter, and it says from Darren Pinder, which asks, where do you think the WordPress ecosystem will be in 5 years, specifically around Gutenberg, page builders, and full site editing? Yeah, I honestly hope that Gutenberg can kind of catch up to the popularity of page builders. I know that there's kind of a following around Gutenberg, and a lot of people are happy with it. I think when it comes to, page builders and all that, there's been a lot of things that are going on there in full site editing. I think in 5 years, I think for me personally, it's going to be more around headless WordPress than anything else. WordPress is going to be around for a very long time because it's extremely popular already, and it's getting more popular. More sites are using it, not less sites are using it. So the future is bright for WordPress. And there's going to be kind of like, I think like a split in the next 5 years. Is there's going to be kind of like the headless WordPress community and the non-headless WordPress community that are going to kind of have their own successes in their different paths. With kind of like the non-headless WordPress community, then I think that there's going to be a lot of, rallying around page builders and full site editing that WordPress is going to be doing. I think that's the way to go. Like, I mean, that's kind of what's made, I think, WordPress extra popular as of recently is like, when WP Bakery was more popular than it is now, like then people are like, holy crap, like this is something that we can, completely change like how we deal with WordPress. And then, kind of Elementor comes along and kind of explodes on like its awesome like editing interface. And then, Gutenberg comes in here, and Gutenberg's still ramping up. It probably will get more popular. But then also on headless WordPress, I think that's going to be kind of where that's going to serve kind of the developers and the content team the most. Is the developers will work with React instead of PHP, and then the content team will be able to still kind of essentially work with WordPress the way that they always thought that, or they should, and rightfully so. And then I think what's going to happen is you're going to need to find this kind of bridge that happens between headless WordPress and vanilla, because right now you can't install plugins. You can't do anything outside of what kind of the developer says you can do with your headless WordPress site. So there's going to have to be like more support for headless WordPress. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to start to see that lots more plugins that are going to say like this works with a headless setup, because when it's going to come with its like own React component or something like that where it can give the headless or the front end of the site the functionality that the WordPress plugin wants in both instances of normal and headless. So I think that kind of is going to ramp up over the next couple of years, and you're going to see kind of a large, even more growth within WordPress. So long story short, thank you guys. I appreciate you watching. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Hopefully it kind of answered some of your questions, helped you learn something. But if you'd like to have another one of these videos, let me know in the comments. Let me know if there is something that you'd like me to cover again or anything like that. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And if you're interested in a little bit more advanced topics with WordPress, check out my Patreon. That's kind of where I put my more advanced stuff recently. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one.